and that's it. I work now around the country, and believe it or not, now we're getting to the point where parents of high school kids are flying their kids into New York to spend time, spend 1 or 2 days. I have about 60 NFL players. We are getting to the point where I think this year we have 28 draft picks going in. So, and we just signed an NBA agent, so we're working with different sports, different people, different backgrounds. So I want to talk to you today about the way we train athletes is very, very different. In the same way that Drew trained today, okay, I was sitting there thinking on the side, you know what? After Drew got done with the deadlifts, if you haven't experienced that, I think it looks pretty easy. Not the whole workout, and I'm not joking. When he got done with the deadlift, I think maybe some of you thought, geez, he must be out of shape because of the, he was doing this stuff. You don't understand if you've never done something like that, not only the speed of movement, and not only how he was working, but the intensity of effort sometimes is disguised by screaming. You didn't see much of that from Drew. He's learned. It's a skill to learn how to work hard in that situation right there. So I think it looked easy. I think he looked out of shape when he got done with that. But I know that that was very, very difficult, the one set. To get yourself to the next set was almost impossible. For some people, that would be it. And I deal with many, many athletes from many different programs. All right? My philosophy on this is different in that the way I present things is the ankles, the neck, the wrist, the forearms. Those things are just as important as the biceps, as the chest. Everything equal. There's no assistant exercises in my grouping. There's no assistant exercise. And you see where it's different than a bodybuilder or a powerlifter. It's different. Okay? If a guy came in the other day from the University of Illinois, he's a tight end, and I told him, I took his training 5 days a week, whatever he was doing. I told him in 2 weeks, you'll gain 10 pounds of muscular body weight. And he asked me how. The first thing I said to him was, we're going to cut your program totally in half. Totally, everything you do in half. He gained 12 pounds in 2 weeks. Rest, recovery, and put in there, not by me, was the fact that I pulled him back a little bit, and he had to train harder. He wanted to train harder because he knew in his head that he wasn't doing those extra 2 days. Okay? It's almost like a prisoner. They let him out of the cell. He gets a limited time to train. That's why these guys increase so much. They get a limited time. They can't wait to get down there. You see those guys training. You see some intense training a lot of times. They'll train very intensely because they're going to be back in the cell. They can only do so many push-ups and sit-ups in the cell. So there's a difference in intensity and intent. And I like what Bob said about being a little bit angry when you approach training. And I think that's very important. But as much as the anger and the intensity and the skill of doing things, you have to learn how to work hard. And sometimes, some people, it's 6 months. The guy I had the other day, I put him on a leg extension, and the only thing I teach these guys in a whole weekend is how to do 1 repetition and give them some sort of intensity. I teach them intensity a little bit of what real hard work is. So that, see, I'm not training these guys all the time. They go home, and I'm stuck with talking to them over the phone, or they send me a video, which they're required to do a lot of times. Send me a video of them training, then I know what they're doing. I don't want, their workout card faxed to me. Right? It'd be useless. So in terms of that, I don't spend a lot of time on all these other sets. The kids are asking, how many reps? I don't get into any of that. Teach them how to do a rep. Because if I'm on the phone with them, and I tell them to do whatever, dumbbell rows, it's going to be automatically intense, right? Because I've taught them how to do a repetition. And that is the bottom line. And no one is teaching that. I'm reading all these books. They go right through it. Slow repetition, blah, 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 blah. Next thing. Sets, reps. No one's teaching how to do a repetition because everything comes from that. All right? You do one repetition properly. And a lot of guys balk at that. They, who's this guy? And talking to them over the phone, it's very tough. Until I get them in town. Until I get them on that leg extension. Or whatever it is. I just spent 4 days with Keith Sims down in Miami. He's had some surgery on his tricep, surgery on his toe. Within 10 minutes of training him, we didn't use a weight. He said it was the hardest thing he's ever done in 13 years of lifting. Okay? And they got a pretty good strength program down there, the Dolphins. Hardest thing he's ever done in his life. Why? Because I put his body in a position that made him work, and we didn't have to use any weights at first. But I always like teaching it that way because that makes you think a little more. I didn't use any weights, and I'm on the floor. Okay? So, in terms of, I'll get to muscular balance in a little bit, but in terms of the repetition, that is the essence of teaching how to do things, how to start a workout. That is the beginning, and that's where you should teach people. Okay? Before you talk about body fat, before you talk about all this other stuff, if you want them to weight train properly, you have to teach that. And the reason for that, when it relates to athletes, okay, I want work not only through the full range of motion, I want muscular work from this point through the point. I don't want jerking the weights because I'm missing part of that muscle group. Even though it's moving, I'm not working through the full range of motion. And if you're an athlete and you're on the field, different than somebody that's working in a regular job or any of that stuff, I can be put in so many different positions where I'm hurt. It could be here, 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 all the way up. So my chance of injury is very great. So if I miss that by doing repetitions that are a little faster, and at the same time I'll get into putting stress on joints and ligaments, you can't do that with an athlete. You can do that with someone else that just wants to train, because the chances of them getting hurt all the time are not very great. You know, Bob related to doing, walking across, that was Drew, walking across the street, and, he's got a bag in his hand, all of a sudden his back goes out a little bit. There's other things that you do that might get you to a point where you get injured, but an athlete, especially a football player, is always at risk. Okay? That's one of the reasons why we do ankles. No one does ankles. We do ankle work. We do calf work. That's just as important as biceps and chest. How many chests do you see getting hurt in the NFL? Not many, right? And just so you know, I do many, many different things with the same idea in mind. I do a lot of consulting for doctors, a lot of rehab consulting, the MedX program, I do a lot of that as far as getting it in around the country and speaking at different clinics. So it isn't just football players, it's every athlete. All right, any questions? Okay.
Can you explain what a perfect rep is?
Do I have time? That's good. You know me. What Drew did, let's say, I thought that that was a very good way of doing things as far as gaining strength through the range of motion. I thought that was a pretty good speed. It was a little slow for some people, and if I had a guy in that was a big tight end from Illinois, and he comes in to train, I don't want to go too slow. That's why the 10 second, the super slow, I think you can get strong doing it. But as far as me teaching something, I'm already teaching something where they have to lower the weight, the weights they're using. So already, hear anything from me. Okay? Because whatever they were doing has to be cut in half almost. Okay? And there's a difference between heavy weight and tension. Okay? Because sometimes if I do 225 with someone, I'll make it feel like 450. And they'll tell me. Because finally they're working through the range of motion. And they're not bouncing it where most people bounce the weights. And consequently, if you think of athletes the same way I'm talking about, in the bottom part of the range of motion is the easiest chance of getting injured. Okay? In this position. Easiest chance of getting injured. That's where you bounce it through. That's where a lot of the force comes in. You can't do that with an athlete. I'm sorry. On a little side note, when that relates to, well, then how do you become explosive? And a couple of the guys I'm with were talking about this the other day. How about Dick Butkus? He didn't even lift weights. You want to talk about explosiveness? Did he have to do any plyometrics? Any power cleans? Didn't know that. I don't think the guy weight trained. Okay? Now, if he would have done things in a manner that strengthened all the muscle groups, maybe that knee injury wouldn't have been as severe. Okay. Going back to the repetition. I think you have to have some sort of, in other words, Drew is up here. And I liked how he got down in this position and didn't do this first. Because if I impart momentum to the bar, muscles are not actually doing any work. They're moving through the range of motion, but they're not doing any work. Now, the other thing that would come into it, if his hips went back. So positioning is very important to the repetition. Okay? So, as much as I can teach a repetition, I would have to see the person, how they're doing the actual exercise, which is very important. Because if he moves his hip out, and I'll give you a good example, this squat movement here. If you have an athlete that's squatting, and they squat down and their knee goes out over their toe, this is the first part of the movement. Well, where do you think all the stress is? On the knees. Now, do I want an athlete, just because everybody said that he should squat, do I want an athlete doing that? Is he at more risk on the field than a person that pushes that knee back and rotates the hip around it? You tell me. He's getting much more work with the thigh. I took Keith Sims, I sat down on a bench, and I'll demonstrate in a minute. It's a manual squat I made up, which doesn't require any weights. And you're just holding the person in this position. Okay? I forced him to work around the joint. Okay? His butt this way. This didn't move. His kneecap didn't move. So I forced him to do work around a pretty full range of motion for him. That guy on the field is going to have much less stress and much less chance of injury than the person that does that squat, just because it's on the board in the weight room. Okay? So generally all of the people that have that up on the board, the 300 squat, okay? What are your kids going to do? They're going to squat. Right? When these kids come into me, does that answer your question, Hank? I mean, as far as a slow repetition, I want something that's where you're not jerking it through the range of motion. Let's say you had a set of 12 reps, and the weight was perfect, that you'd get 11 or 12 reps. Okay? And that's a whole discussion upon itself. Of what would get you to the point where 12 would be the number with that certain weight. Okay? In the first 3 reps, you have 100% of your strength, basically. You could jerk the weight up. I don't want to do that. I want to put much less force into that movement because I have 100% of my available strength at that point on that exercise. Let's say it was the first movement. So I want to move through the range of motion. I don't want to jerk anything. Okay? I want to move through the range of motion, pause without locking the elbows. Now this is important. On the pause, the release from the pause is very important. If I release it fast, the negative is going to be much less harder to control. So the release after the pause is this. and then it's released. Pausing again, keeping tension on the muscle group, squeezing the weight up. So the first 3 reps are done in that way. We have 9 left. When we get to the point where it's the second 3, I can move a little bit faster. But you got to be careful here. When you say faster to someone, they're thinking the old way of training right away. So they want to jack the next 3 up. So I say under control for the next 3. Now when we get to number 8, 7, 8, 9, I want them to still have the same technique except for the pushing part. I want the pause down here, and I want them to explode. But you're not going to see that bar move very fast. If the weight is a weight that 12 reps will handle, that person can handle for 12 reps. Okay? So in the last couple, here's what guys do, or girls, or whoever's training. They come down on that last 3, they go like this. They're already thinking about coming up. So what they do is at the end, I say explode, they think, I don't mean that, I mean, and then explode as fast as you can. You have to move very fast to hurt you or to put tension. And believe it or not, with something like the bench press, I think it's one of the worst exercises you can do. Just with hand position alone. And the reason I say that is because all the athletes that come in, a lot of them have shoulder problems. A lot of football players with shoulder problems. I turn their hands like this, almost no pain at all. No pain. Just turning their hands. And I do that with the feet also. Different positions of the feet. Not on like, some people may be thinking, calf raises. They say, yeah, turn them out. You know what I mean? You know what? It might affect the muscle a little differently. But you're putting more stress on areas of the knee. So again, going back to athletes, that's where that comes from. Does that answer your question? Anybody else on that topic? Somebody had one? Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you explain how you go about exercising ankles and wrists? What type of exercises do you do?
Well, for something like wrists and hands, and that's a good point, as far as the wrists are concerned and hands, if I have an athlete, and most of these athletes in football anyway are hurting their hands. So if you have an off-season program that's just limited to barbells, and now you want to keep that person strong in season, it's going to be very hard to do. Because you've got to use your hands for everything. These guys have all finger problems. Down at Tampa Bay, Mark Asimon's great strength coach, he has no hands training, which I think is great. These players can't come in and keep strong with free weights because they got to hold everything. They can't do it. So as far as the wrists go, we do the basic wrist curls. That's one of the most direct exercises there is. Wrist curls, reverse curls, everything that you guys know already, but with the repetition added in. So that's why I can call someone in Kentucky, a guy who just had Keo Sanders, who's going to be drafted pretty high. I can call him up and go, you know what? I want you to change the exercise a little bit. I want you to change the wrist curls now. That's all I have to say. I can send him down a picture of the exercise, but all I have to know is that he knows how to do the repetition. If I know he knows how to do the repetition, the exercise, for the most part, will be correct. Now, sometimes I get some lunatics that send the film back, and you wouldn't believe what you see. And it's very hard in this way, and I'll get back to you. It's very hard in this way to describe all this to these players. Because believe it or not, what they're hearing and what I'm telling them is like night and day difference. I mean, I have people that are taking barbells, and this is a strength coach. Well, I won't name him. I'll be nice. Get up on a box. I want you to jump off the box. When you jump off the box, I want you to think, and this is out there. I'm telling you. This is out there. So this is nothing, oh, by the way. I'm just giving you a little example. Jump off the box and thinking in your head, when you hit the ground, I want you to explode as high as you can. Squat position, barbell, 135. Jump off. For explosive ability. How do you feel? Think Dick Butkus ever did that? You think any of these guys? I mean, someone in their right mind one day is going to say, you know what? That's dangerous. I'm not going to do that. You gotta be kidding me. The guy for the Bears years ago, he had a man with dumbbells doing it. Jumping. 80-pound dumbbells, you gotta be kidding me. But this, and believe me, I'm not just saying this is a couple of people. This is what's out there. And a lot of times, what's out there is the strength coach has it in the program. He has neck in the program. I think that would be an area that you'd want to concentrate on for football, so you don't get hurt, or maybe the severity of the injury won't be as good, won't be as severe. But in the program, he has it, but no one doesn't. All he wants to see is a bench and squat. Can't do that. As far as an athlete's concerned, and in doing ankles, dorsiflexion, manually or on a machine, okay? Different, calf raise, stand, all the stuff you know. But in the same way, I'm talking about the repetition again, going back to that. Okay? Some little manual movements also, manipulating, things like that. Making sure they work through the full range of motion, same thing. But in terms of doing all of that, you will not get a lot of players that will do that. They don't consider that ankles. I want to train my chest. Right? And what you're seeing is, back to my philosophy again, when you do these things, see, I look at the groin, the butt, the calves, all these areas, I'm adding 5 pounds to the guy right there. Right there, because the guy's never done it. I mean, going back to Keith, I put him on the adductor machine. I think it was like 30 pounds. He put his feet in dorsiflexion, which I always do on a lot of these machine exercises. He pulled it, he couldn't even get it in. Okay? I've taken some guys, and this is where we get to muscular balance. I've taken guys that can do a lot of weight, just like this, laying on the floor, just lifting, holding it there. The guy gets up. I look good. I'm strong, man. But then I put him lay face down on the bench, and I let him lift this way. Okay? All of a sudden you see, what do you see? You see this? You see this? He goes back to the lat to get some strength. And me, I like to bust him a little bit. I give him a little pink dumbbell. There's something psychological there. All right? And he looked, I said, look at him. And he's holding and he's shaking. Why is that? It's because the back of the body is one of the weakest areas and should be the strongest. So as far as gaining weight, I become a genius all of a sudden. The guy gains 10 pounds. We didn't even do anything yet. I didn't even train the guy. The guy didn't even fly into town yet. I didn't even show him how to do a rep. I just cut his program in half. Getting more recovery, as you were talking about before. And he's getting much more out of the workout. I advise him on a couple of things. Doing different exercises correctly, but he doesn't know it. All of a sudden the guy gains 10 pounds, doing more back work than anything. He's doing more back work than he ever did chest work. I had a guy the other night, I was talking to him for the first time. He was a freshman, benching 500 pounds, strong kid from Massachusetts, freshman in college, benching 500. They put him on a squat test that they have there. 260 pounds, the record was 25 reps. And I doubt it was full, because I just know the mentality of that. He did 68 reps as a freshman. This kid's real strong. He's 6'1 and a half. He's, I think he's 310. He's put together pretty good. But you know what? He's the weakest dog I can hear him on the phone. I know he's weak. He's strong in this movement. Right? But if you relate back to the bench press, and someone from Nebraska, I think, just said this, or it had something to do with the, what's that crazy training with the hammer strength thing? That stuff, okay? They looked at the bench press and said, you know what? Here I am doing bench press, but I got something behind me. I got something supporting me. When I'm on the field, I have nothing supporting. There's nothing on my back. The muscles of the back support me now. And what do most people do? They don't train that area. Okay? So I look at things a little bit different. Everything for the back is done twice. Everything for the front is a 2-to-1 ratio. That's what I do in the beginning. I work on the grip. I work on the neck, posterior delt, all the way down. And that's what we do. And the guy gains, or even the girl, gains weight, looks better. But for the most part, when I'm talking about athletes, you see it all the time. And they increase in things and areas where they're going to do better and not get injured as much. Very important. So I look at things as not whole body exercises. You know, those do I do them? Yeah, I do them. I do trap bar deadlifts, we do that stuff. But at the same time, I'm making sure that we do adduction, abduction. You know? What's the first thing a guy says when you tell him to do it? Oh, the girl machine? I say, girl machine? Come here, pal. Put your butt on this thing, and let me put you through a set of adduction. And like his eyes went out of his head. 30 pounds. You know, it was funny, the lady got on, she did it wrong afterwards, but she got on afterwards, she put like 90 pounds on it. And I put my arm around. Look, see this lady? She's about 69, and she's doing 90 for reps. So, and he understood it. He's very intelligent. He understood the premise of addressing all these muscle groups that he's never addressed before. So we do things differently where we do try to isolate, especially in the back. Especially that old Nautilus machine. I love that thing. Takes the hands out of it. A guy sends me a routine. I look at the routine and I say, you know what? I add up all the sets for the front of the body. Kid just recently from one of the Pennsylvania schools sent me a program. And he had 114 sets for the front of his body and 10 for the back. Now, the 10 for the back, I even split up more because he had to use the front of the body to get to the back. So he was down to 5 sets of somewhat decent, dumbbell row, things like that, where he was supported, his back was supported. I don't like the bent over row. Okay. When we refer to backs, there's a lot of back injuries. I think a lot of things are related in that way. And what happens is a guy gets hurt on the field, and you blame it what happened on the field right there. Oh, that's the guy. You don't look at back a couple of steps, and he might have been doing box jumps. That's really good. All right? So I think that all of this injury, everything is related, a lot of things are related to imbalance also. I don't think it's related to this whole flexibility thing. I think that's overrated. I don't do a lot of flexibility with these guys. I see them, they come in and touch here. 6 weeks later, not one stretch or anything. In the beginning, yeah. And they're already touching their palms down. Straight leg. Because we've been doing full range of motion work. Okay? Something has to relax on the other side. Okay? Now when we get into free weights, I see what everybody's talking about the supportive structures. When you do a curl, it's like Andrew said, the whole body's being used, which is fine. Okay? But you better work that bicep in some sort of isolation exercise. Athlete, we're thinking. Athlete. In the same way I'm talking about. You better do something like that because, yeah, the synergist, all that stuff is working. You're being supported. You have to use more energy to do a bicep curl with a free weight. I'll give you that. But then you better do this other stuff. If you're a high school kid and you have high school kids, you don't have Nautilus machines, okay? Let's get some manual resistance exercises that you can do for the posterior delta without free weights. But you better do those. They better be in the program. Or you're putting these kids at risk. Just doing squats, deadlifts, and bench. You're putting them at risk. And if the board is up there, you put them at more risk. Because everybody is against one another. That's the wrong idea. You have to be in competition with yourself. Okay? Any questions so far? Nothing?
Would you mind going over the proper position for this Nautilus rear deltoid machine in terms of how close up to the pad?
Well, it's funny. It's funny as they You know, that's one of the tougher machines in the gym. They have the hammer one. Anybody have that hammer one that you lay face down? You know, people don't like to use that. Why do you think they don't like to use it? Because you know what? People's faces have been in there. Okay? That's why they don't want to use it. It's a great exercise. And to be put in that position, and this seated one is pretty good, but if you've done a lot of deltoid work before that, it's just hard to hold your arms up. If you're doing any kind of intense training. If you've done this, then it's much easier to do that. If you've done this, okay, and you're gone up there, then if you have the next exercise in that order, it's going to be, you know, a little limited. So a lot of those things I do first. And, you know, it's just a very simple movement.
But
Hands
you keep
open.
your shoulders relaxed, you put your body up against the pad.
Well, that's all a teaching thing. I mean, sometimes you have a situation where they have that pad that wraps around and sits in front. I mean, I think it's a great exercise. I like particularly the laying down, you know, face down, because you can get yourself in a better position. You don't have to worry about this giving out. But that, you know, it's really in the repetition we go back. Setting up is definitely the alignment has to be proper. If it's not proper, the exercise is not going to be proper. So alignment is always first. You see so many people, and you know, it's funny. I spent 4 days with Keith, and you know, like the second day we're going to the gym, and he's telling me now, look at this guy training. He's not doing anything, which was great. I knew he got it. It's a real easy concept to get. Okay? I think so. It's very easy to get strong. Very, very easy to get strong.
So in your proper rep, using a bench press as an example, you start out down here, you squeeze the weight up,
Okay?
you stop.
Right.
You bring the weight back down to your chest.
Well, first,
you stop.
release it slower. If you just release it, then it's hard to get a real good negative through the full range of
But
motion.
if you got it up in full lockout,
But we don't lock out.
okay,
See?
take that back right
You're
there.
getting it.
You don't lock out because that
Uh-huh.
lock your elbows, all the weights on your elbows, nothing on your muscle. Okay, you've got it just below a lockout.
Okay?
You don't actually let the weight come down, you actually resist it going down. Almost where you have to...
In a manner of speaking, but I mean, negative only training was a thing they did, you know, years ago, and it's still done to some degree. But it's very hard to do, you know, especially with these athletes. You got real strong athletes. You got 3 or 4 guys picking the weight. I mean, I think it's good in a limited sense, but only in the sense that on a negative only, you'd be trying to almost push that way. And the force of the weight, if it was a proper weight, would make you go down. Okay, so you are resisting a little bit somewhat. And I think that, you know, as far as sets, we do between like 1 and 3 for everything. Mostly 1, if they do it properly.
So, yep.
Well, I think that's all that anybody wants to do if you're doing it that way. Okay? So that's kind of where I come from on that. There's a great book out that I just took a look at. It's Roger Schwab, Strength of a Woman. Man, this book is good. And you can take the word woman and delete it and put in anything. Basketball player, hockey player, volleyball player, anything. Right? The only way we make things specific is I look at the person, I take down all their injuries. The guy comes in, he tells me everything. From high school on, ankle sprains, the whole thing. That's in the program right away. Any injuries in right hamstring. We're working on that. I put that in the program. If you just look at the football muscles, the possibility of being in an imbalanced situation is pretty good. Because if you just, you know, the front of the National Strength Coaches Journal has different colored body parts. And, oh, that's that shot put. There's the muscles. That's fine. But then if you don't train the opposite groups, and in some points, if it's the back of the body, more so than the others that have been naturally, you know, gotten strong over a period of time, then you're putting yourself at risk. When a kid walks into junior high and they walk in the weight room, before they get to that door, they're already stronger in the front of their body. Already. It's just the way your body is. Reaching things, pulling things, pushing things. You're stronger up here. You're weaker back here. Kid goes through the weight room, works out through junior high. Now what kind of situation we have? Now we have a kid that has done a traditional program of benching, squatting to some degree, depending on the strength coach and the age of the kid. Now we have a kid who's really out of whack, who's really in a situation where he's imbalanced. Goes to high school, now it's even more. The emphasis put on benching, squatting, different things like that. It's never the balance. You never have the balance there. I'd love to see you hey, how many chin-ups can you do and how many dips can you do? There's pretty much balance right there. You never see the kid do more. And you know what? As far as an exercise is concerned, he'll never do more chins. I mean, in the days he's training. Kids will always do dips. They don't want to do chins. It's too hard. I do all these high school seminars that go in the weight room. What do they have? 5 benches, 2 declines, and they just got enough money for a pep deck. Great, here it is. It's here. It's football related. All right? Why didn't they get a neck machine? Because there's one area that is not addressed as much. Right? But as far as injuries, somebody asked in one of the seminars, I think it was one of these debates that went on. Matt Brisky was there and all those guys. And somebody asked the question, why the emphasis on the neck? I never see the neck get injured. You know, it's one of these situations, you hurt your knee, you go down, you can recover. You hurt your neck, you're in trouble. So I'm not saying that because you did neck extension on a hammer machine and you've done it over the year, that you're not going to get hurt. But maybe the chance of injury won't be as great and the severity of the injury won't be as great. You can't get away from that. Right? If I had a 93-year-old lady, an athlete, and a young girl, if they bend their arm, they bend it in the same way, the same muscle is contracting. Okay? Obviously, they're going to have different intensities. You don't want, the 93-year-old lady carrying the sandbag, for instance. No pun intended. And we get into a situation where, I bend the arms, hey, I'm bending the arms of you, I'm bending the arms of you, the same basic movement. I don't want to change anything. And as far as the sports specificity crap, this is where I get pissed off. I'm out of my mind, but I just got to contain myself with this thing. When you get into a situation with sports specificity, trying to duplicate what goes on the field, you have a situation where you have no transfer there. Room A, room B. Football field, weight room. 2 totally separate things. There's not even that overhang thing for the rain. There's nothing connected. It's 2 different rooms. If you try to duplicate sports movements, that's that angle, throw, javelin. I saw a guy with these pulley things. They were tied to the weight room cage, and he was having the girl do that. Ooh. And, if it was my kid, that guy wouldn't be standing, I'll tell you right now. Because when you get into a situation that it's not opinions anymore, you're putting that kid at risk. And that's where it becomes dangerous. So if you try to change and duplicate movements in the weight room, you will have injury. And most of the time, unfortunately, it doesn't happen right there. It doesn't happen right there. She doesn't go down. Okay? She hurts it somewhere along the line doing the sport she does. And then you blame it on the sport. And all the tension in the elbow, she's got all these elbow. Where do you think it came from? and doing things improperly. So as far as opinions, there's a lot of opinions. I mean, we could talk about sets and reps till the cows come home. I know that's an opinion. But as far as doing things properly, for this situation, going back to athletes, we're talking about something totally different. And addressing muscle groups that are all over the body. I lay a guy on his side and do manual resistance testing for his abductors. I put him in the right position, and I don't let his hips roll over, anything like that, so he can recruit other areas. I put my hand on him, the guy can't even lift his leg. Why is that? You think that's not important for running, for blocking? There was a guy at a seminar years ago, he was the scout for the Bengals, and they were talking about bench press and all this stuff with bench press. He raised his hand and he goes, you know what? When I go down to a school and I'm driving, and I look at the sheet next to me and I'm looking for the kid, and I go down there and look at the sheet and it says, bench press is 475. I know I do not want him as an offensive lineman. Think about this. Because what does he look like? He knows what the guy looks like. It's like this. He's got elbows attached to his shoulders. He knows what he looks like. That's why, look at Anthony Munoz. He took him, he benched 315 or something like that, 325. Max, Anthony Munoz. How many years Pro Bowl? Okay. He wanted separation from the defensive lineman. He didn't want the guy in here. If I have my elbows attached to my shoulders, the guy's already on me. He wants this. Okay? Any questions so far?
Dave,
Yes.
could you elaborate more on the flexor extension 2-to-1 ratio and how you train that?
Okay, it's very simple. You know, I think things are very simple in this field. You know, lat pull downs, bench press with a vertical handle on a machine, lat pull down. That's as simple as it gets. All right? Now we take obviously the step a couple further, but there it is, 2-to-1 ratio. As far as I'm concerned, he's doing more work, and a lot of times we don't train the chest. Because I know the guy's so strong in the chest. What do I want to do that for? You can't name the people on one hand that have hurt their chest in the NFL. Okay? And most of it's related to what they were doing in the weight room, if they did hurt it. So as far as that, that's as far as we go. It's very basic. And I do use a lot of machines. I do use things like that. I think it's a great thing. And I see it all the time. I have the athlete, we have a lot of athletes coming in. I take the guy in, he sits down on that machine that you were talking about, and he can't do it. He can't hold 40 pounds at this range of motion. What does that tell you? It tells you that he's weak in a lot of areas, especially that area in the back. Now, the lower back's very hard to train. When we do, 45-degree hyperextensions, reverse hyperextensions, you got to remember something. Always the same way as far as the repetition is concerned. Always the same way. I'll go slower sometimes, but I'll indicate it on the workout card. And we do hyperextensions for that. No good mornings. The only good morning you're going to have is a good morning doctor. Okay? I just thought that. So, a lot of times these things, you got to remember something. Every time you take a weight and it goes an inch away from your body, it's 10 times the weight on your low back. Put the weight out here, that's a major stress going on the low back. Does anybody know what a force plate is? Force plate, stand on it, registers how much force you have. Right? They took a guy that weighed 260, he's on his force plate, standing there, and they gave him a 60-pound barbell. So now he weighs 320 on the scale, and the line's going across it. And I wish I had the overhead to show you. What the guy did was he did a curl, just one rep of a curl, in excess of 3,200 pounds of impact force from jerking up a weight that weighs 60 pounds. You think that's dangerous? Right? Multiply that with a power clean. A 5-rep or a maximum power clean. You gotta be kidding me. We're talking about so much stress on the body. Good for the weightlifter? Definitely. That's what they do. That's what they do. That's the sport they're in. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about athletes. So if you do that with an athlete, you're putting them at risk. Right? That's a small little area right here that you put 3,200 pounds of force from one rep. So let's do a set of 10 and then add that up. Okay? Now, on the other side, the guy then did a nice curl. Okay? And there's a flat line right across. Hardly any force. Okay? And remember, the transfer is not there. This explosive training is dangerous.
How do you make a judgment when these kinds of supporting structures and ancillary muscles that are trained less often are ready when they've caught up with the other muscles? In other words, if somebody says, when do we start bench pressing? And you say, as soon as your rotator cuffs and shit. How do you know the rotator is ready for the bench, for
That's a good
example?
question. You know, I don't get to a point where I say that. That's just the program. Because you're talking about, you know, like Keith, they go back to him, 13 years of doing something. So it's going to take a long time before he gets back as far as his range of motion, as far as his strength of his rotator cuff. So I don't ever assess that. That's usually the program. In the beginning, sometimes we'll do a program like neck, posterior delt, pullovers, lat pull downs. We save the lower back to last. Glutes. Mostly, sometimes we do adduction because, you know, it's such a weak area. Calves, ankles, a little dorsiflexion. And that's the program. And wrists. And that'll be the program for the kid for a while. Or at least the emphasis is on that, because remember, you're dealing with psychological factors too. The kid comes in, he goes back to his coach, I'm not doing any bench press. I've had kids that still do testing in high school. They still do this testing of 1 rep or 5 reps. We've done no bench presses, no squats, and they have increased. I had a kid gain 70 pounds. Now, he was maturing. 70 pounds, what would you say, a year and a half? So it was obviously not only me doing the workout, but we hardly did any of that. Hardly did any squats. And that kid was a real situation, rounded shoulders. You know, he was over like, you know, he grew, he's about 6'6", the kid. He's a high school kid. Very big kid, but very weak in all of those supporting structures. Any other questions?
Well, it sounds to me like, I'm not an athlete. I like to work out. It sounds to me like you're stating that, all right, it's better to use a push-pull system. If you push, you pull. If you pull, you push. Opposing muscle all the time.
That's right. But now I take that to a degree of looking at the athlete and what they've been involved in life itself, and put in the fact that why do we have all these chiropractors? Because everybody's hurting the back of their body. There's no, you know, there's no chest chiropractor. Is there? They just adjust chest. But that's what I mean. And when I say that, it's just like, so we take that to a 2-to-1 ratio, and that's the format of the program. I'm not saying every time we have that in. And I'm not saying we don't do bench presses. We do them. Because the kid has to do them when he goes back to high school sometimes. Or on that college sheet that comes in, the coach wants to know how much you bench press. That's a difficult situation. A lot of times I send kids with chiropractic notes. Okay? And what do you think happens when they show up at the school that does those jump squats? Okay? And the kid says, well, I have a back problem. See, the doctor wrote this little thing that I shouldn't be doing.
Wash them off.
No, they don't, because you know what? The biggest dig on these people is that we're saying that it injures you, and especially low backs, and they get nervous. And I say, more times than not, I can get the kid out of it a little bit, especially if they're good athletes. Because then after a while, the strength coach isn't looking all the time. There's many situations in the United States right now where the assistant strength coach has a good head on his shoulders, and he sees the other guy, you know, the head strength coach has bench press, squats, deadlifts. He's taking them and training, you know, and you're not saying anything about it because he loses his job. But he gets into a situation now, okay, let's do rotator cuff, let's land manual, let's do abduction, So he does that stuff. It's not in the program, but he knows he's keeping them a little bit safer. but there's a lot of people blowing out discs, squatting as much as they can. The other day in that news there up on Long Island, they had a kid who tried 350 pounds. There's not a lot of weight. The kneecap, both kneecaps blew right off the whole, everything, separated, and the kid went down, and I don't know how many months he was in the hospital. I remember there was a comic strip a long time ago. There was this guy squatting into a mirror, and all you saw was the guy in the back, and both kneecaps were bloodied on the mirror, embedded in the mirror. The guy had a full squat, but the weight, the guy drew it great. The weights were wrapped around his body, and all the stack plates were 15 plates on each side. And that showed, hey, what goes on as far as demonstrating strength. Everything related to demonstration of strength is counterproductive to the development of strength. All the time. All the time.
What is your recommendation for muscle imbalance for the upper thigh, quads, and hands?
Well, they really haven't figured this whole thing out with, the ratio. I'm sure that, the quads have to be a little bit stronger, obviously. They're going to be anyway. And as far as a recovery rate from that, it's very hard to recover with your legs. That's why we only do legs, the compound movements anyway, once a week. Sometimes once every 2 weeks. If you're doing it right, you won't want to get on there. And you don't need to get on there all that time. We do a lot of manual, hamstrings. We do a lot of everything related to that. The standing one. I'll try to do anything just to make it a little variety for the person. But as far as that's concerned, I know the quads are very strong. So it's the same thing I was saying before. 2-to-1 ratio. We try to work those hamstrings, and all the muscles associated with it a lot more.
What is the split between upper body and lower body in your routine?
I would say more lower body exercises, but then if you throw in the rotator cuff, see, we're putting together a program now where the athlete finishes and then goes and does a little bit more as far as a rotator cuff exercise, a wrist exercise, maybe another calf movement. If they can, we've got kids that, afterwards they can't get up for a while. We got kids that, if they would never try this because they're dead. They're laying on the floor. All right, and that's, a lot of times we don't use any weights. A lot of times we do manual work. And I like the manual work because you can really see how the person's progressing. And the only thing wrong with it is that you can't define it. You can't say, this many reps, this much weight. But I can feel, I know all the kids that we have. And it's harder to train these other athletes that come in. But as far as imbalances are concerned, I just look at that part of the body as the weak part all the time. So that's the way I take the program.
What strength training program would you recommend for boxers, considering the movement that they have to use?
Okay, considering, you guys see that? For a boxer, what program would you recommend considering the movement that they have to do? The movement that you have to do in boxing is unrelated to what you have to do in the weight room. Okay? And I'll give you an example. Evander Holyfield, I do a lot of boxing stuff, I was glad you asked that. He had that contraption on him. You see that thing? That thing is great if, and it probably would protect his ears a little bit, if he got out there and did it, that was the sport. Probably be a new sport, with tension on it and stuff like that. I think it would be good. But when you get into a situation like that, the boxer should train just like I just said. Same exact thing. Identify muscles that he's injured. Identify areas that are, suspect to injury possibly, like the wrist. Train those areas. Train the wrist. I said Mike Tyson's in the ring doing those neck bridges. Did you see him? Anybody ever see him doing those? Oh my God. Picture this. The neck bridge, which is contraindicated for all, even for, wrestlers now. You wouldn't do that with a wrestler. Neck bridges is terrible. Steve, neck bridges? Okay. Sit down, take it easy over there. I know you're about to go off the wall on that one. Tyson was doing this. Neck bridge, flipping over. Back. That fast. On his neck. That guy's a respected trainer, too. Pretty good, huh? So, in that situation, there are things that are done that you would just, Any person, my mother sitting next to me, goes, wow, that looks dangerous. And you know what? That's exactly true. How could you do that to someone? But it's especially boxing, it's the old stuff coming in. A lot of the old exercise coming in. Muhammad Ali in '64, with the underwater boxing, became popular. Hey, you know what? That's a pretty good strength thing. But it's not going to make you any... You lift Muhammad Ali out of the water, okay? He's not going to be any faster from that. He had that skill. He had that. That skill was already in there. You're either hooked up or you're not hooked up. You're either hooked up properly or not. You're not going to get hooked up. Maybe hooked up you'll get. Man, these huns are... but you get into a situation where you have to strengthen all of the muscle groups. Now, could ankles come into that? To some degree. Right? So in that way, I would make it a little less as far as ankles and things like that. But I'd put more emphasis on the areas that were injured. But we would not take, nothing's the exception. I do a lot of neck work, other things like that, and improving your flexibility. That's one of the things, what I'm saying is with boxing, it comes into a position where, it's the old stuff. It's like spitting out the water, that kind of stuff. It comes from all this old material. And like lifting weights. You take guys, dumbbells. Okay? Nothing, talk about stress on your elbow, wrist. And what's supporting you, what's stopping you with that dumbbell? And that's the wrong approach to the whole thing. I think just a general training routine will make you not a better boxer, but more able to handle injury. Your punches will definitely have more force in it. You'll be more flexible. And that's just from doing weight training. It's nothing else. Not putting any, some of these guys train, they overtrain, very big overtraining area. Look at the jogger, look at Michael Spinks, when they changed him from doing sprints from the old distance work. Okay? The energy system was different, right? He used different energy. I thought it was better that he was doing sprints. Interval work. That's boxing. Okay? I think, Bob, who was the guy, the boxer, who was at Hammer Strikes for a while? Remember? Was it Buster Douglas? Anybody?
Yeah, Buster Douglas.
Yeah.
He had a hammer strength shirt on when he fought Tyson in Tokyo.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, must have took the shirt off after that match. You get into a situation where the boxer can improve so much by just doing weight training in room A, boxing in room B, and not making boxing an overtraining stimulus. The less you train, the harder you'll train. The less time you have, the harder you'll train. You tell a boxer to work out for 3 hours, it's not going to give you much in the first 2 hours. You know how that last, a lot of these athletes I do a lot of nutrition and all the running with them. All of a sudden, I do the whole running program with these guys. And the running program, believe it or not, is the same idea, the same thinking as the training, as the weight training. If I'm going to do 10 sprints, if I wrote that on one of their papers and just faxed it to them, they'd laugh at me. 10 sprints. But then when I have them in town, I teach them how to do the first one, right? Thinking about reps now. Teach them how to do, this is what I want you to do. I want you to run this 40 as hard as you possibly ever could. Like there were scouts there and everything. You know what? They make it to number 5, and then they're on one knee. That's what I want. That changes things. Not the 10 half-ass ones. Okay? So 10 could be a real 10, or it could be just, you're thinking you're going through the range. I want you to put everything in the first one, because if you look at a lot of training things, give me that last one. Work, run as best you can on this last one. It's the last one. And why do you do the last one hard? Because it's going to be over with afterwards. If you're thinking that way, then as far as a training response, you're not going to get as much out of it as you could if you did real good hard 1, 2, and 3, and 4, the first 4 40s. So we teach that the same way as far as conditioning. As far as skill work, everything's related to the skill. They have to do this 20-yard shuttle. They They're down, they run, touch a cone, run to the other side, touch a cone, and run through. How it's related to football, I don't know, but that's the test they came up with. And I go crazy on that stuff too. But there's a skill, and they say, well, how should I run? Should I run with ankle weights on? Should I run with a parachute? You don't understand that the skill is best developed by doing what? Doing the skill. Doing the skill. And getting stronger. Because in order to move from point A to point B, if you're stronger, you're going to be faster. Okay, any other?
I have one question.
Sure.
Reference overuse athletes for overuse injuries, like the shoulder for swimmers and pitchers in baseball. I have a lot of kids. I coach Little League, and nowadays kids are more specific on a certain sport. They don't play, I play 3 sports, 4 sports, sometimes they can play in a year. Now they're playing baseball in the spring and summer, baseball in the fall, going to clinics in the winter. So now you got this kid, 12-year-old kid, 13-year-old kid, throwing the baseball many more times, or a swimmer, swimming 5 times a week, swimming many hundreds of yards. How do you tell a parent that someday that arm's not going to be anything left?
That's one of the toughest situations I come into a fight. And here's an example. A kid calls me from Pennsylvania, the parent calls me from Pennsylvania, and he says, now this is the number, he's in the top 5 high school pitchers in the United States. The parent calls me up, talking about training. He got my name from somebody else, and calls me up, and we're talking about training, and he says, I said, well, what is he doing for strength training? What's the coach telling him to do? I said, well, we're throwing bricks. All right, so I pause on the phone for me, trying to keep myself under wraps a little bit. I say, all right, next time the coach comes out, make sure he's in direct line with your son when he throws the brick. The parent flew the kid out to me. No more need for conversation there. Okay? But in that situation, it's very difficult to get, and that's accepted. Let me tell you, that brick thing, we're laughing, that's accepted. It's unbelievable. Oh, that's accepted. Throwing medicine ball, accepted. There was a guy I saw in the Jets field when I was going to practice. Now, they do no ankles in their program. 18 ankle injuries in the first 2 weeks of practice. Guys out there with medicine balls, throwing them across the field. And in his program, the weight room, the design of the weight room, this many machines, this many bench presses, 14 medicine balls. For what? Guys are hurting their ankles. How about a seated calf raise? Ever think of that? What's that, $900? Okay? That's the situation we're in, and that's why it's tough with a parent. You have to be very direct. Let the guy call me now. You have to be very direct because it's a very hard situation with these, and I see it more and more where these kids are specializing. And then I love when the coach then says, oh, now I know about strength training also because I read in the book. So you're going to get out of the pool and we're going to do only specific strength training exercises. So now the kid's shoulder's killing him from doing the movement in the pool, comes out and does more shoulders. Not rotate a cuff, God forbid, or posterior, right? Doesn't do any of that. Now in that situation, I would have the kid just do those exercises. I would never bench them.
Like for instance, the young kids nowadays, we think of like surgical tubing for pitchers.
It's great.
For young kids that, rather than lift weights, just do the surgical tubing.
It depends on the age, and it depends on, there you go, because here's the kid working out 5 days a week with Joe pitching coach and Joe nutrition coach, and, he's even got, how to put your hat on coach, And there's a situation where we get the kid, now you tell him to do more. And it's the last thing in line, it's that rubbery tubing. So now the kid gets pissed off, he's not going to cut the pitching coach, he's going to cut you out. Because now it's something extra to the kid, and, we see the kids all the time. We send these kids home, they come into training, the kids go like this. I'm not kidding you, right? Gongus comes in, go home. Parents go, oh, are you kidding me? We're going to train. I want you to train him into the ground. I'm not kidding you, we get this all the time. And I've moved the age up over the years. It used to be 12, now it's 14, and I think we're going to go to 15. Because these kids are burned. And we really sit the parents down and tell them exactly how we feel. Bar nothing. Just right out. You are hurting your child. And that's the thing that you have to say to these parents. And you have to give them reasons why. You can't just say it, obviously. So in that situation, you get a kid like that, I think I agree with that, with the surgical tubing. It's something, but if the kid's, he's got a Saturday and he's going to go out with his friends instead of do surgical tubing. He's going to go out with his friends, thank God, because the kid has some sort of life. And that's why the weight training, I think, has to be either held off, or if the parent understands it. And we have a lot of kids that the parents know exactly what we want and don't want the kids to do. And we run into a lot of situations where, you're here. We run into a lot of situations where the parent is put in a situation where I'm saying, you know what? This is contraindicated for the kid to do. And then the coach, like I said, now they have them doing these jumping things. There was this Russian thing one time where they take them on this big swing and they pull them back, like up there, and they let them go. I am not kidding. Into the wall, and you explode. Every joint in your body. You explode off the wall, and that's supposed to build power and explosiveness. Whoa. Okay? And that's where all of this stuff is coming from. And then the coach does something else like plyometrics. And now the kid's put into an even worse situation. Because he's doing things that are very stressful. So, does that help you a little bit? It's hard, man. It's hard. God, short of grabbing